You will not speak to me like that. Jake!
Excuse me?
Excuse me, I think you're in my way.
I am exactly where I need to be.
In a dazzling luxury boutique, a wealthy white woman publicly mocks a black woman, convinced her skin and status make her unworthy of belonging, but the moment of cruelty sets off a storm she never saw coming. From the tense opening where subtle biases and humiliations unfold, to the heart-stopping confrontation where silence from staff and manager deepens the wound, the story crescendos into a powerful reversal. The customer she tried to destroy is revealed as Alicia Johnson, the silent owner of the brand. Each chapter builds on betrayal, systemic racism, and fear of speaking out, until the dramatic climax flips the script. Alicia's calm strength dismantles arrogance, exposes complicity, and forces everyone present to reckon with their silence. What begins as a cruel attempt to humiliate ends in poetic justice, as the racist abuser loses her reputation, her social standing, and her illusion of power, while Alicia reclaims dignity, justice, and control. The glass doors of Maison Lorette, one of the most exclusive luxury boutiques in the city, slid open with a whisper. Alicia Johnson stepped inside. Her stride was unhurried, her presence commanding without needing attention. She wore a tailored cream suit, simple pearl earrings, and carried a discreet leather clutch. Nothing about her screamed wealth in the flashy way that usually filled the store. She didn't need it to. The boutique's air was perfumed with money, polished marble floors, crystal chandeliers, shelves lined with handbags that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Alicia's eyes swept the displays.com, observant, detached. Then came the voice. "Excuse me." A sharp tone sliced through the gentle background music. Alicia turned. A tall woman in a ruby red dress and diamond necklace stood near a display. Her platinum hair was perfectly styled, her manicured hand clutching an expensive crocodile skin purse. Victoria Hemsley, the type of woman who wore entitlement like a second skin. "You there?" Victoria waved impatiently, eyes narrowing. "Yes, you. Finally, someone who works here. I've been waiting forever." Alicia blinked, her expression unreadable. "I don't," Victoria cut her off. "Don't just stand there. Get me that bag from the top shelf, the black crocodile one. Hurry up." Silence hung heavy. From behind the counter, two sales associates froze. Their eyes darted between Alicia and Victoria. No one spoke. Alicia's lips parted, her voice calm. "I think you're mistaken." Victoria scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Mistaken? Please, you clearly work here. Don't bother pretending otherwise. You people are always trying to sneak in here anyway." The words stung, not for their originality, but for their familiarity. They dripped with the casual cruelty of someone who had said them many times before and gotten away with it. One of the sales clerks shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. The other forced a smile at Victoria, murmuring, "Of course, ma'am. We'll get that for you right away." But Victoria wasn't finished. Her gaze lingered on Alicia, sharp and dismissive. "Really, the standards here are dropping, letting just anyone wander around, pretending they can afford something." Alicia met her eyes, silent, steady. Her calmness was a blade, sharper than anger. The silence stretched. Customers nearby glanced over, then quickly looked away. Victoria smirked, mistaking silence for submission. "Well, if you're not going to help, at least move aside. Some of us actually belong here." Narration cut in, brief and heavy. This was how it always happened. Not in shouts, not in fists, but in the easy cruelty of assumption, in the silence of witnesses, in the weight of words left unchallenged. Alicia inclined her head slightly. "Enjoy your shopping." Her tone was polite, but laced with steel. Victoria's eyes narrowed, offended by dignity she hadn't expected. "Unbelievable," she muttered loudly, ensuring everyone heard. They really let anyone in these days. The sales staff didn't correct her. They bowed to money, not to justice. Alicia moved deeper into the boutique, her movements graceful, her silence deliberate, but every step pressed against the rising tension, a storm gathering in plain sight. The first encounter was over, but it was only the beginning. The boutique grew louder, though no one had raised their voice. It was the sound of whispers, of shoes shuffling against marble floors, of people pretending not to notice. Victoria noticed everything. She turned back toward Alicia, her lips curving into a smirk that could cut glass. "Oh, So you're just going to ignore me now? How typical. Alicia's gaze rested on a row of handbags. Her stillness irritated Victoria even more. Excuse me, Victoria called out, her voice carrying through the boutique. Is anyone going to deal with this? Some people don't belong here, and it's ruining the atmosphere. One of the sales clerks, a young man in a crisp suit, hurried over. Yes, ma'am, how may I assist you? Victoria pointed at Alicia, her perfectly manicured nail jabbing the air. She's standing around, pretending she's a customer. It's ridiculous. Look at her, no jewelry, no stylist, no driver. She clearly doesn't fit in. The clerk's throat tightened. Ma'am, I'm sure she's Victoria. Cut him off with a sharp laugh. Oh, please. Do you know how I can tell? Because real customers don't hesitate. They don't walk in here looking lost. She's obviously here to gawk at things she never owned. The words landed like stones hurled across polished glass. The clerk glanced at Alicia, but his lips stayed sealed. Alicia spoke, her tone low but firm. You should be careful with assumptions. Victoria's laughter rang out, harsh and mocking. Assumptions, darling. I've been shopping in places like this before you could even pronounce the names on these bags. I know who belongs and who doesn't. The other clerk, a woman with sleek hair pinned back in a bun, stepped closer to Victoria, smiling tightly. We'll be happy to bring down anything you'd like to see. Ma'am. Victoria leaned in toward her, lowering her voice just enough for those nearby to hear. Exactly, because if we let her near the merchandise, who knows what would happen? A ripple of uneasy chuckles floated from two bystanders. Others kept their eyes fixed on the glossy shelves, pretending to study the displays. Narration slipped in. Humiliation doesn't always arrive with shouts. Sometimes it comes in the laughter people force themselves to give, in the silence they choose to keep, in the weight of every eye that looks away. Victoria tapped her diamond bracelet against the counter. Now, I'll take that black crocodile bag, and while you're at it, show me the sapphire clutch, something worthy of a gala. Not that she'd know. She tilted her chin toward Alicia, voice dripping with disdain. Alicia finally turned her head. Her eyes met Victoria's, steady, unwavering, unbroken. I know more than you think. The words were simple, quiet, yet the temperature in the room shifted. Victoria blinked, startled for a split second, before scoffing again. Oh, don't flatter yourself. Do you have any idea how much these bags cost? More than your monthly salary, I can promise you that. The staff froze, caught between two forces, money and morality. Money was winning. Victoria took a step closer to Alicia, her perfume thick and overbearing. Here's some advice, she whispered, loudly enough for the room to hear. Next time you want to play dress-up, do it somewhere less embarrassing. This place is for serious buyers, not dreamers. Alicia didn't flinch. Her expression was carved from calm stone. The silence stretched again. Every second felt heavier than the last. Then Alicia spoke softly. You've said enough. For the first time, Victoria faltered. The words weren't loud, but they carried weight. A warning. But instead of backing down, Victoria laughed. Oh, I've barely started. Let's see how long the store lets you wander before someone finally has the sense to escort you out. The young sales clerk shifted uneasily, but the older clerk shot him a look that froze him in place. Narration struck again. No one moved. No one intervened, because silence is easier than courage, and humiliation thrives in that silence. Victoria flicked her wrist dismissively and turned back to the counter, satisfied with her performance. Now, where's that bag? I don't have all day. Alicia exhaled slowly, her gaze still steady. Her silence no longer surrender but defiance. This battle wasn't over. It was only intensifying. The boutique's chandeliers glimmered like frozen stars, their light reflecting off glass cases, but beneath the shine, tension thickened like fog. Victoria stood at the counter, tapping her jeweled fingers impatiently. Well, the bag. I don't have time to waste. The saleswoman hurried to retrieve the crocodile handbag. Her smile looked polished, but her hands trembled slightly. She placed the bag in front of Victoria like an offering. Victoria snatched it up, holding it high. Now this, she declared, is real craftsmanship. Not that everyone here would appreciate the difference. Her eyes darted again toward Alicia, a smirk tugging at her lips. The young clerk spoke cautiously. Would you like to try it with the matching wallet, ma'am? Victoria waved her hand dismissively. Of course. Bring it, and make it quick. Then, as if struck by an idea, she turned suddenly to Elise. Actually, why don't you tell me what you think, since you seem to be wandering about like you belong here? Her tone dripped with sarcasm. Alicia's voice was calm. It's a fine piece, but it's not worth the cruelty you're wrapping it in. The words landed sharp and clear. Victoria let out a theatrical laugh. Cruelty, darling, this is reality. Some of us buy, and some of us admire from afar. Don't take it personally. The sales staff exchanged nervous glances, but said nothing. Victoria leaned closer to Alicia. Tell me, do you even know the price of this bag? Alicia stayed silent. Victoria answered herself, delighted by the performance. $32,000. A single swipe of my card, and it's mine. Can you even imagine? The silence that followed was worse than the insult. It was the sales staff looking down, pretending to rearrange scarves. It was the customers who pretended to study shoes rather than faces. Narration cut in. Heavy silence doesn't erase cruelty. It sharpens it. Every unspoken word, every averted gaze, every laugh swallowed out of fear becomes another stone on the pile of humiliation. Alicia finally spoke. Voice like steel wrapped in silk. Price isn't proof of worth. Victoria rolled her eyes. Oh, spare me the philosophy. If you can't afford it, just admit it. The saleswoman attempted a nervous laugh, trying to redirect the conversation. Would you like me to wrap this up for you, ma'am? Yes, Victoria snapped. And bring out your most exclusive collection, the kind you usually keep in the back. I want something no one else here could possibly touch. She cast a pointed look at Alicia. The clerk hesitated. Those items are by appointment only. Appointment? Victoria cut her off. Do you know who I am? Call your manager if you must. I'm not leaving until I see them. The staff nodded quickly and scurried away. For a moment, the boutique was filled only with Victoria's satisfied sighs. She adjusted her diamond necklace, basking in her own importance. Then she turned back to Alicia, her smile sharp. You should take notes, sweetheart. This is how people with real money shop. Alicia's eyes held hers. Steady. A storm held back behind glass. Money can buy a bag, not class. The words hit harder than volume ever could. A hush fell across the boutique. The young sales clerk looked up, his lips parting as if he might say something. But the older clerk shot him another warning glance. Fear chained his tongue. Narration whispered. They all heard it. They all knew. But silence is safer than truth. And so silence reigned. Victoria straightened, affronted by dignity she couldn't crush. You have some nerve. Do you think speaking back makes you equal? Please, look around. No one here is on your side. Her words lingered in the perfumed air, cruel and cutting. And yet, Alicia didn't flinch. She simply folded her hands in front of her, as if holding back a truth that would not be caged much longer. The boutique waited, and the silence grew heavier than diamonds. The boutique's polished marble seemed to hum with unspoken tension. Victoria's voice sliced through it like a blade. Honestly, I'm starting to wonder if security is even doing their job. She turned, loud enough for the whole store to hear. People just wandering in, pretending to shop. It's absurd. A woman browsing shoes glanced up nervously, then quickly looked down. The young clerk shifted again, torn between duty and fear. Ma'am, he said carefully. I'm sure there's no issue, Victoria snapped. No issue. Look at her. She gestured at Alicia with a sharp flick of her wrist. She's loitering, taking up space. Do you really think she can afford a single item in here? The words echoed, bouncing against glass cases and velvet displays. Alicia stood, perfectly still. Her silence was no longer passive, it was deliberate. Victoria smirked, mistaking it for weakness. If management doesn't do something, I will. Perhaps I should call security myself. The older saleswoman stepped forward quickly, trying to soothe. Please, ma'am, there's no need. Oh, there's every need. Victoria interrupted. I spend more in one visit than most people here earn in months. I won't be made uncomfortable by people who don't belong. The cruelty was sharp, casual, and absolute. Narration cut in. This is how the line is crossed. Not with violence, but with entitlement. Not with fists, but with words sharpened into weapons. And those who should protect dignity, they stand silent, hands folded, eyes lowered. The young clerk's lips trembled. He wanted to speak. His eyes flicked toward Alicia, apologetic, almost pleading, but fear chained him still. Victoria took a step closer to Alicia. Her perfume trailed like a banner of dominance. Why don't you just admit it? You came in here to dream, to touch what you can't have. It's sad, really. Finally, Alicia spoke. Her tone was low. Even, you should be more careful with your words. Victoria laughed, sharp and cruel. Careful, with you? Oh, don't flatter yourself. People like me don't answer to people like you. The hush that followed was heavier than any shout. Alicia's gaze never wavered, calm, measured, a storm contained. I don't need your approval to exist here. Victoria's smirk faltered for a heartbeat, just a heartbeat. Then she scoffed, exist. Please, stores like this aren't for existing, they're for spending, so why don't you step aside before I have you removed? The words drew a visible flinch from the young clerk. He turned away, ashamed. Narration whispered, every time silence meets cruelty, cruelty grows bolder. Every second of cowardice becomes permission, and permission becomes violence, not always in fists, but in humiliation that cuts just as deep. Victoria turned back toward the counter. Where's that manager? Clearly your staff can't handle the situation. The saleswoman darted toward the back, relief on her face at having something to do. Victoria's diamond bracelet glinted as she adjusted it. She tilted her head toward Alicia one final time. You should be grateful, you know, grateful someone like me even acknowledges you. That's the closest you'll ever get to this world. Alicia's voice was steady, a quiet strike of thunder. You're wrong, and soon, you'll know just how wrong. The words landed like a tremor, a warning. Victoria blinked, momentarily unsettled, but she quickly covered it with a brittle laugh. Oh, the attitude. You'll regret that when security walks you out. But deep down, under her diamonds and arrogance, a sliver of unease had already taken root, and Alicia's silence was no longer mistaken for weakness. It was waiting. The boutique doors to the back office swung open. A man in a tailored navy suit strode forward, his expression polished into corporate neutrality. Richard Lane, store manager. Good afternoon, Mrs. Hemsley, he said smoothly, already addressing Victoria before even glancing around. I hear there's been some disturbance. Victoria's painted lips curled into a smile. Finally, someone competent. Yes, there has been a disturbance. This woman, she jabbed a finger toward Alicia, has been loitering here, pretending she's a customer, making everyone uncomfortable. I demand she be dealt with immediately. Richard's eyes flicked briefly toward Alicia. His smile never wavered, but his gaze held calculation, not curiosity, not fairness, calculation. I see, he said lightly. Then, turning back to Victoria, I apologize for the inconvenience. That should never happen here. Victoria folded her arms, satisfied. Exactly, a store of this caliber should maintain standards. Richard nodded once, then stepped toward Alicia. Ma'am, perhaps this isn't the best time for browsing. If you'd like to come back later, we can schedule a private appointment for you. The words were polite, but the meaning was sharp. Step aside, disappear. The silence in the boutique pressed down like weight. The young clerk swallowed hard, eyes darting between Richard and Alicia. He wanted to speak, but fear stitched his mouth shut. Narration cut in. This is betrayal dressed in professionalism. A system that smiles while pushing you aside. No raised voice, no harsh word, just the quiet blade of exclusion, slipped between the ribs with practiced ease. Alicia's voice broke the silence. Calm, steady. You don't even know who I am, and yet you've already decided. Richard shifted, his polished mask tightening. Ma'am, I assure you, I'm simply trying to keep the peace. Mrs. Hemsley is a valued client. Victoria smirked. A very valued client. Alicia's gaze locked onto his. And what am I? For the first time, Richard faltered. His lips parted, but no answer came. The air grew heavier. Customers paused in their browsing. The boutique transformed into a stage where silence was complicity. Alicia spoke again, her words deliberate, each syllable laced with steel. You bow to money, not to truth. You protect arrogance, not dignity. And you don't even hear yourself doing it. Richard cleared his throat, flustered. That's not I only meant, but Victoria cut across him, enjoying the spectacle. Why are you wasting time explaining yourself to her? Just escort her out already. Or shall I call security myself? Her voice rang through the boutique, bold and demanding. Richard turned back to Alicia, trying to regain his composure. Ma'am, I must insist. This is not the place. Alicia's voice cut him off, quiet but sharp enough to silence the room. You've already chosen your side. The words hit like stone. Victoria gave a triumphant laugh. Finally, someone said it. Now, if you'll excuse us, I'd like to see the private collection. But the tremor in the room had shifted. Not enough for Victoria to notice, but enough for the silence to grow uneasy. No longer complicit, but restless, narration whispered, every system shows its cracks when pressed. Every silence breaks eventually, and those who think their power is absolute never notice until it's already slipping from their hands. Alicia didn't raise her voice, She didn't fight. She only looked at Richard, then at the clerks, then at Victoria. Her expression was calm, her silence no longer passive but promising. Something was coming. The boutique felt colder now, though the chandeliers still spilled golden light. Richard, the manager, gestured toward the back. Mrs. Hemsley, if you'll follow me, I'll have the staff bring out the exclusive line. Victoria smiled smugly. Finally, service worthy of my name. She turned, her ruby dress swishing dramatically, but not before casting Alicia a look of triumph. See, some of us command respect, others just linger. Her words echoed, cruel and casual. The young clerk's jaw tightened. For a moment, he seemed ready to speak, but the older saleswoman shot him another warning glance. He stayed silent, shame burning in his eyes. Narration slipped in. Complicity isn't always agreement. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's the fear of losing a job. But fear doesn't erase guilt. It only delays the moment when guilt comes crashing down. Alicia stood quietly, unbothered by the performance. She wasn't fuming. She wasn't flustered. She was waiting. Victoria draped the crocodile handbag over her arm and twirled before a mirror. Oh, it's divine. How much again? 32,000. That's nothing. I spend more on champagne in a week. Her laughter bounced off the marble walls. A woman near the jewelry counter whispered to her husband. He frowned, stealing a glance at Alicia, recognition flickering across his face. He tugged his wife's sleeve, urging her to stay quiet. But his eyes didn't leave Alicia. Something about her posture, her composure, her absolute commit, wasn't the air of a woman defeated. It was the air of someone who owned the ground she stood on. Victoria mistook that calm for defiance. You're still here, she sneered, striding closer again. Don't you have the sense to leave when you're clearly unwelcome? Alicia met her eyes. I leave when I choose, not when arrogance commands. The words froze the air. Richard cleared his throat nervously, trying to reassert authority. Ladies, let's not escalate. But Victoria cut him off with a sharp laugh. Escalate? I'm not escalating. I'm educating. Someone needs to remind her of her place. The cruelty in her tone was unmistakable. The staff looked away, their silence a second betrayal. Narration pressed. How many times had this same scene played out? Different faces, different stores, same silence. The arrogance of power, the cowardice of bystanders, and the dignity of those forced to swallow humiliation like medicine, bitter and endless. Alicia tilted her head, her voice soft but heavy with meaning. You're teaching lessons you don't understand, but the final one won't be yours to give. For the first time, Victoria hesitated. Her smirk wavered, as if some part of her recognized the warning beneath the words. Then she laughed it off. Louder, sharper, desperate to reclaim control. Oh, darling, the dramatics. You should be grateful I'm even speaking to you. One word from me, and you'd be out of here for good. Alicia didn't move, didn't blink. Her silence was no longer empty. It was filled with something unseen, something powerful. The husband near the jewelry counter leaned closer to his wife, whispering urgently. I've seen her before. I think, no, I know. But his wife hushed him quickly, her eyes darting nervously around the boutique. It wasn't time yet. And Alicia gave no indication, only standing in the center of the storm, poised, unshaken. Victoria waved her hand dismissively, turning back toward the manager. Now, show me the most expensive clutch you have. Tonight's gala demands perfection. Richard forced a smile, eager to please. Of course, Mrs. Hemsley, right away. But unease had already started to ripple through the air. The silence wasn't the same anymore. It was restless. It was waiting. And so was Alicia. The boutique seemed to hold its breath. Victoria stood at the counter, the crocodile bag clutched under her arm like a trophy. Richard hovered nearby, desperate to appease her. The sales staff bustled nervously, pulling out velvet cases, opening drawers that only a select few customers were allowed to glimpse. Victoria's laughter rang out again. Ah, finally, the real treasures. I knew my status would open doors. She glanced at Alicia with mocking delight. See, this is what happens when you belong. You get access. You get respect. Not pity. Alicia's voice was calm. Respect isn't something you buy. It's something you earn. Victoria let out a sharp laugh. Earned, darling. Everything in this world is bought. Respect, power, even silence. The words stabbed the air like knives. The young clerk flinched, his conscience tugging at him. But again, fear sealed his lips. Alicia stepped forward, her posture unshaken, her gaze steady. Richard, the manager, froze. caught off guard by the way she spoke his name, not like a stranger, but with the weight of authority. "Why, yes, ma'am. You've already chosen her side," Alicia said softly. "But now, step aside." Richard blinked. "Excuse me." Alicia's tone sharpened, though her volume never rose. "I said, step aside." The room shifted. Customers glanced up. The sales staff paused mid-mo. Something in her voice made the chandelier seem to flicker. Victoria scoffed loudly. "Oh, listen to her, barking orders like she owns the place." She turned, gesturing dramatically to the clerks. "Well, she doesn't. So stop gawking and get me that sapphire clutch." But no one moved. Their eyes were on Alicia. Alicia exhaled slowly. Then, she reached into her clutch bag and drew out a slim black leather wallet. From it, she pulled a single card, heavy, embossed, gleaming under the boutique lights. She laid it flat on the counter. The logo was unmistakable, the official crest of Maison Lorette. Gasps rippled through the boutique. Richard's face drained of color. The young clerk's eyes widened. Even the woman by the jewelry counter whispered, "I knew it." Victoria frowned, confused. "What is that supposed to be? Some fake membership card?" Alicia's voice cut through the silence. "It's not a membership, it's ownership." She paused, letting the words land. "My name is Alicia Johnson. I don't shop here. I built here. Every bag, every shelf, every light above your head, it belongs to me." The boutique went utterly still. Victoria laughed once, brittle and forced. "Don't be ridiculous. You expect me to believe?" Richard's voice broke in, trembling. "She's telling the truth." Victoria spun on him, eyes wide. "What?" Richard swallowed hard. "Miss Johnson is the silent owner of Maison Lorette. She oversees the parent company. Without her, this boutique doesn't exist." The words landed like thunder. Victoria's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Her face flushed crimson, as if the blood itself had betrayed her. "You're lying," she whispered. "You have to be lying." Alicia met her gaze. Calm, steady, unbroken. "I don't need to lie to you. Not now, not ever." Victoria staggered back a step, her crocodile bag slipping in her grasp. She looked around, desperately, expecting someone to laugh, to deny it, to rescue her from humiliation. No one did. Narration cut in. Truth doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to prove itself with volume. It simply stands, steady and undeniable, until arrogance crumbles beneath it. The young clerk straightened slightly, shame and relief in his eyes. The older clerk turned pale, her silence finally catching up to her. Customers stared, whispering furiously among themselves. Victoria tried to recover, forcing a strained laugh. "Well, even if that were true, it doesn't change anything. You can't treat me like this. Do you have any idea who I am?" Alicia's tone was precise, each word deliberate. "Yes, you are a woman who thought her wealth excused cruelty. You are a woman who mocked dignity because silence allowed it. And you are a woman who believed she belonged here more than anyone else." Alicia stepped closer, her presence like gravity itself. "But this boutique is mine, and respect, here, is not for sale." The words landed with finality. Victoria's lips trembled, her diamond necklace sparkled, but suddenly looked cheap against the weight of her humiliation. Alicia turned her gaze briefly to Richard. "And you, when arrogance speaks, you listen. When cruelty cuts, you stand silent. That silence has a price." Richard's face crumpled with shame. "Ms. Johnson, I didn't." Alicia raised a hand, silencing him. Later, her focus shifted back to Victoria. "You came here seeking to humiliate. Instead, you've humiliated yourself. That is the lesson you'll carry out those doors." The boutique buzzed with whispers now. The balance of power flipped entirely. Victoria clutched the crocodile bag tighter, her hands shaking, her voice cracking. "You can't do this. You can't embarrass me like this." Alicia's words were ice. "I didn't embarrass you. Your arrogance did." The silence that followed was heavier than diamonds, louder than applause, and in that silence, the tables had turned. The boutique felt like a courtroom now. Every eye was fixed on Victoria, who stood trembling, clutching her bag like a shield. The glossy floors reflected her humiliation back at her. The chandeliers, once dazzling, seemed to spotlight her shame. Alicia didn't move quickly. She let silence stretch, let the murmurs build like waves crashing against a cliff. Victoria finally snapped, her voice sharp and frantic. "You don't understand. I'm respected. I'm known. You can't." Just a customer by the jewelry counter cut her off. "Known for what?" "Mocking people because of their skin." Victoria froze, her head whipped toward the voice, but now others joined in. A middle-aged woman whispered loudly. I saw the way she spoke to her. It was disgusting. A man near the watches nodded. Yeah, she thought her money made her better. But look at her now. The murmurs grew louder, heavier, surrounding Victoria like chains she couldn't shake off. Richard, the manager, cleared his throat nervously. Miss Johnson, I deeply apologize for how things were handled today. We should never. Alicia cut him off, her voice steady. This isn't about apologies. It's about accountability. Her gaze swept the boutique. Staff, customers, Victoria. How many of you saw what happened today? How many of you heard the insults, the mockery, the assumption that someone didn't belong simply because of the color of her skin? The room was silent, but hands began to lift hesitantly. The young clerk's hand, then the woman by the jewelry counter, then two more customers. Finally, nearly half the room had their hands raised. Alicia's narration slid through, measured and raw. Silence is complicity. When cruelty shouts, silence stands beside it. But when silence breaks, truth floods in like light. Victoria's face was pale now, lips trembling. This is madness. You're twisting. Alicia stepped closer, her presence undeniable. No, this is clarity. You humiliated me because you believed your money gave you that right. You mocked my skin, my place, my worth, and everyone here saw it, Victoria stammered. I didn't mean. Yes, you did, Alicia interrupted, her tone like steel wrapped in velvet. You meant every word. You wanted to wound. You wanted to make me smaller. But cruelty has a way of shrinking the one who uses it. The crowd murmured again, this time in agreement. A few customers shook their heads at Victoria, their disdain visible. Victoria's eyes darted around desperately, searching for an ally. Richard wouldn't meet her eyes. The clerks avoided her gaze. Even her husband, silent near the wall, looked away in shame. Tears welled in her eyes, mascara smudging. She tried again. You can't just destroy my reputation like this. People know me. Alicia's words cut her down gently but firmly. Reputation isn't built on diamonds or crocodile skin. It's built on how you treat those with less power. And today, you revealed yourself. The boutique door opened quietly. Another customer entered, only to pause, sensing the electricity in the room. Victoria clutched the bag tighter, but suddenly it seemed meaningless, a piece of leather in the face of truth. Alicia turned her gaze toward the staff. You were silent when cruelty happened. Do you know what that silence cost you? Trust, integrity, the very dignity of this place. The young clerk swallowed hard. His voice broke as he finally spoke. She's right. I should have said something. I was afraid. Alicia softened slightly at him, her tone almost kind. Fear is real, but dignity is stronger. Next time, speak. The boy nodded, shame and relief warring on his face. Richard finally found his voice. Miss Johnson, please, if there's anything I can do to make this right. Alicia shook her head. Making it right isn't about me. It's about making sure no one else endures what I endured. From now on, every employee here will be trained, not in selling, not in smiling, but in respect. The staff exchanged glances. Stunned, Alicia turned back to Victoria, her words deliberate. And you walked in here believing this place existed to serve you. But the truth is, cruelty serves no one. It only destroys. Remember that the next time you try to measure a person's worth by their wallet or their skin. Victoria's tears fell freely now. Her voice cracked, small and broken. You'll regret this. You'll regret humiliating me. Alicia's tone was final, cold and poetic. I didn't humiliate you. You unmasked yourself. I simply refused to look away. Silence, heavy, final. The customers stared at Victoria with disgust. Some whispered, others shook their heads. The humiliation was total, irreversible. Victoria's knees buckled slightly. Her husband touched her arm, urging her toward the door, but she jerked away, still clinging to the crocodile bag like it could shield her from the weight of justice. Alicia turned her back on her without another word. Narration slid in, quiet but powerful. Power is not in wealth, not in diamonds, not in luxury. Power is in dignity, the kind that doesn't waver when arrogance rises. And dignity, today, had spoken louder than cruelty ever could. Victoria stumbled toward the door, the crowd parting but offering no kindness, no sympathy. When the door shut behind her, the boutique exhaled in one long, collective breath. The reckoning was complete. The boutique was quiet now, though the echoes of what had just happened still hung in the air like perfume. The tension had broken, but in its place came a heavy reckoning. Richard stood stiffly by the counter, his face pale and damp with sweat. The sales staff avoided his gaze, all of them acutely aware that silence had cost them more than they imagined. Alicia adjusted the strap of her clutch bag, her expression calm but unreadable. She didn't need to raise her voice. The silence gave weight to every word she spoke. "Richard," she began, her tone measured, "tell me, what do you think this boutique stands for?" Richard swallowed hard. "Luxury, service, status." "No," Alicia cut in gently but firmly. "It stands for dignity, for beauty, for the belief that craftsmanship matters because people matter. When you let arrogance take root here, you betrayed that." His shoulders sagged. "You're right, Miss Johnson. I failed." Alicia regarded him for a long moment. "Failure isn't final, but denial makes it permanent. You denied cruelty when it happened before your eyes. What should I do with that?" The words hung heavy. Richard fumbled for an answer but found none. The young clerk stepped forward timidly. "Ms. Johnson, I want to do better. I should have spoken. I knew it was wrong, but..." His voice cracked, shame cutting through. Alicia softened slightly. "Fear is a cage, but cages can be broken. What matters is whether you break it next time." He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. The older clerk, silent through it all, finally spoke. "Ms. Johnson, I've worked here for 20 years. I thought staying quiet kept the peace, but today, I see it kept the poison alive." Her voice shook. "I'm sorry." Alicia nodded once. Acknowledgement is the first step. Narration cut in, stark and reflective. Racism thrives in silence, in the spaces where people convince themselves it's easier to look away. But silence is not neutral, it's permission, and permission builds walls higher than cruelty itself. The customers who had lingered out of curiosity now looked on with respect, some even admiration. A few approached Alicia. "Thank you," the woman from the jewelry counter said softly. "I've seen things like that before, but never seen anyone stand so firmly against it." A man added, "The way you handled her, you didn't yell, you didn't insult, you just stood your ground. That's real strength." Alicia inclined her head slightly. "Strength isn't in loudness, it's in not moving when the world tries to shove you aside." Richard cleared his throat, voice trembling. "Ms. Johnson, if you'll allow me, I'd like to step down from managing this boutique. I don't deserve..." Alicia's eyes narrowed, but her voice was steady. "Running away isn't accountability. You don't get to walk away from the mess you helped create. You'll stay, but from this day forward, every decision you make here must reflect what this boutique was built on: dignity, not status." Richard blinked, stunned. Relief and shame tangled across his face. He nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am, I promise." The staff stood taller now, though the weight of guilt still lingered. Alicia's presence had stripped them bare, but also given them a chance to rebuild. The boutique door opened again. Victoria was gone, but the whispers of her humiliation remained like fingerprints on glass. Customers exchanged knowing looks. Some smiled faintly at Alicia, grateful to witness justice that day. Alicia finally moved toward the door. The staff instinctively straightened, waiting for a final word. She turned to them, her voice soft but unwavering. "Remember this. Wealth doesn't make a person valuable. Respect does. And if you cannot give respect to every person who walks through those doors, then you don't belong here." Her words struck with the finality of a judge's gavel. Narration slid in like a quiet echo. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it is the steady hand that reminds the world where dignity lives. Sometimes it is the refusal to let cruelty have the last word. With that, Alicia pushed the glass door open. Sunlight poured in, gilding her silhouette as she stepped out into the street. Inside, the boutique buzzed quietly with change. For the first time, silence didn't feel like complicity. It felt like reflection. And reflection, Alicia knew, was the seed of something stronger: resistance. The following week, the story had spread. What began as whispers inside one luxury boutique had spilled into dinner tables, offices, and headlines. Social media carried it farther than even Victoria's diamonds could reach. Videos, posts, hashtags. "Wealth doesn't buy respect. Dignity over diamonds." Alicia Johnson, the silent owner who spoke out. Everywhere, people were talking. Victoria's name, once synonymous with charity galas and society pages, now sat beneath harsher titles. Heiress caught in racist outburst at boutique. Money can't buy class. Her so-called friends turned quiet. Invitations stopped arriving. Endorsements vanished. Her humiliation was complete. Narration cut in. When arrogance builds its throne on cruelty, It forgets one truth thrones crumble fastest when the ground beneath them rejects the weight. Meanwhile, Maison Lorette's reputation soared, not for its handbags or crocodile clutches, but for the way its owner had stood, unshaken, against humiliation. Alicia had not just protected herself, she had carved a standard into the walls of luxury itself. In her office. A week later, Alicia sat by the window, sunlight glinting off the skyline. The boutique's manager, Richard, stood nervously across from her. His tie was tighter than usual, his posture straighter. "Ms. Johnson," he said carefully, "I've begun implementing the training you required. Sensitivity sessions, accountability measures, protocols for intervention. It's already changing things." Alicia nodded. "Good. But remember, this isn't about policy. It's about people. Training means nothing if hearts stay silent." Richard lowered his head. "I understand. I'm grateful you didn't replace me." Her gaze held him steady. "Gratitude means little. Change means everything." Richard nodded again, visibly humbled. Moments later, the young clerk entered, carrying files. He looked different, more confident, his voice less timid. "Ms. Johnson, here are the reports you asked for." Alicia smiled faintly. "Thank you. And how are you feeling?" He hesitated. "Stronger, because I learned that silence isn't safety, it's surrender." Her smile deepened. "Good. Hold on to that." The boy left, shoulders squared. Silence filled the room again, but this silence was different, no longer the silence of complicity, but of rebuilding. Across town, Victoria sat in her mansion, scrolling endlessly through comments, every word cutting deeper. She had tried to issue a statement, polished by her PR team. It backfired. People called it hollow, insincere. Her phone buzzed less now. The friends who once adored her avoided her. At a gala she attempted to attend, whispers followed her like shadows. The crocodile bag, once her weapon, was now her chain. Everyone recognized it. Everyone mocked it. She hurled it across the room one evening, the sound of its fall echoing through her empty living room. Her husband stood in the doorway, weary. "Maybe it's time," he said, "to think about why this happened, not just what happened to you." But Victoria turned away, pride choking her even in downfall. Narration settled like a verdict. Some lessons are embraced, others are resisted, but truth doesn't bend for pride. It waits, it lingers, until even pride cannot hold against its weight. Back at her office, Alicia watched the city below. She thought of that day in the boutique, the laughter, the mockery, the silence. She thought of how quickly cruelty rises and how slowly resistance grows. But resistance, once planted, is unstoppable. Her assistant entered softly. "Ms. Johnson, there's a journalist here asking for a statement about the incident." Alicia leaned back, her tone calm. "Tell them the truth doesn't need statements. It stands on its own." The assistant nodded. Retreating, Alicia whispered to herself, almost like a prayer, "Respect is not for sale. Not here, not anywhere." The sunlight poured in, draping her office in gold. Narration closed the story, steady and final. Injustice humiliates, silence enables, but resistance rewrites, and when dignity speaks, it echoes far louder than cruelty ever dreamed. This was not just a reckoning in a boutique, it was a reminder written into stone. Wealth may glitter, but justice shines brighter. Alicia closed her eyes briefly, letting the truth settle. The reckoning was not just for her, it was for every voice that had ever been silenced, every dignity denied. And as long as she breathed, that reckoning would never end.